Hello and welcome back. We are here continuing our semi-tutorial series, semi-open beta discussion series, and today we will be talking about the top 5 winners and top 5 losers in patch 1.5 as a result of the changes of patch 1.5, and these top 5 winners and top 5 losers are going to be pulled from the top 10 countries in Victoria 3 as of patch 1.4, and for those top 10 we have selected all the great powers, so that's Great Britain, France, Russia, Prussia, Austria, USA, as well as Spain, the Ottoman Empire, and then Great Qing, and the East India Company. And those are the top 10 we are going to be discussing here and talking about who's the winners and who's the losers. Now, it's important to emphasize this is winners and losers, and so this is going to be how are they changing in terms of metagame strength relative to the other countries, not which ones are going to be the absolute best. So some country that might be the best might end up being a net loser here in 1.5. There are a lot of considerations going into 1.5. The kind of biggest one in terms of the economy is the introduction of local prices, which make it so that you will pay more for goods. If you have a lot more sell orders for a good, it will depress the price. So you can see here there's a lot of sell orders in Midlands for clothing, and which depresses the price, and they are actually sold at this 22.3 price, not the market price of 25, and having to sell at a lower price is bad. And similarly, when there's a lot of negative orders, or there's a lot more buy orders than sell orders, this will increase the price, and so we have the local price of 23, so we are paying more for fabric here than the market price 21. And this is influenced by what is called MAPI, or Market Access Price Impact. A higher MAPI score means that your market price informs prices more, and a lower MAPI score means that the local prices inform prices more, and you want a high MAPI score. And this greatly informs things. Specifically, it makes you really value local economies where you can build up the traditional construction loop, which, you know, is going to be iron frame buildings at the start of the game, and then is going to be steel frame buildings shortly thereafter. And so you want places where you can build, have all the inputs for, you know, iron, and then have the output be iron frame construction buildings, all the inputs for wood, all the stuff that you need to input wood and output wood, all the stuff you need to input and output tools, and then to a lesser extent also fabric, but fabric is also a real consideration. And so what you end up looking for in terms of countries is it really, really matters that you have a country that has states that have iron mines, and then they also have coal mines, because the atmospheric engine pump and condensing engine pump are important, and then you can build tools which feed into both the mines, and the tools require steel, which requires both iron and coal. And so fundamentally you need these states with coal, iron, and wood all together. And this is the most important thing as it relates to MAPI. We will also be discussing, you know, unique interest groups. There are several unique interest groups. For example, the UK has this petite bourgeoisie interest group, and we're expecting to see some changes here. This is probably not as important as MAPI, but some interest groups are particularly strong, and some are weak. And so, like this one, instead of giving 10% bureaucracy, this is giving 5% bureaucracy and 50% authority on the petite bourgeoisie, and instead of 10% loan interest rate, 15%. And so this is going to make a difference. Also is the introduction of companies, of which, you know, some companies there will be locally your ability to locally found them. So, for example, we have the Great Western Railway here in the UK that we can found, that no one else can found unless they have access to some of our states. Lancashire, for example, gives access to a particularly strong state in the form of, let's scroll down here, it's somewhere down here, not John Brown Company, but Baclaw, Vaughan and Co. Requires that we have research Bessemer process, but this is localized to Lancashire, and so this is a consideration when evaluating who's winning and who's losing. Also, in 1.5, there's a general improvement to the value of navies, and while this isn't entirely seen yet, because 1.5 is currently in an early iteration, you know, where the naval battles are not yet happening, we are going to assume that navies are more important. They're already more important because you can't use double and triple and quadruple landings as abusively as you could before, and so this will be important, as will, you know, to some extent, how armies are changing with mobilization edicts and this type of thing, although I don't think that there's any country that has a very large pronounced differential in terms of mobilization as well as composition, which will be kind of appearing in the next sprint, hopefully here, but is currently not a consideration in this iteration of the beta. And then also, Generally speaking, economies have been slowed down. This is to some degree a point that is important, particularly in the case of countries that have a lot of buildings at game start, like the UK, will have been improved because it takes longer to build buildings. The construction cost of every building has gone up from 33 to 80%, or 33 to 77%, and this is very significant. And also, MAPI slows down all economies because if you're paying more for your inputs and receiving less for your outputs, which is generally what happens, overall economies will be slowed down. This also leads to a depressed standard of living, which is another change. The overall depressed standard of living means lower literacy, it's harder to get qualifications, and then also there are nerfs to population growth, which makes countries that have a lot of population more valuable. And then finally, we will also be talking about, technology is kind of being an important thing because specifically there were some technologies that were introduced and made important in 1.5 where you have these new kind of branch where some countries can start with corporatism and business banks, which give them access to companies, and the stock exchange technology is very important because it gives 10% market access price impact. And so this is going to be, kind of a thing where the countries that start off with the highest tier tech will start with two companies unlocked and stock exchange. And a lot of other companies will have to, at the very game start, be wanting to research stock exchange, corporatism, business banks, in addition to, kind of making a run for railways. And so there are companies or countries in general that are, kind of further behind in technology will be more disaffected by the introduction of very important technologies towards the beginning of the game and the beginning of the tree, which not everyone starts with. And so let's get into it. Just a quick note, this video is going to be extremely long, so if you want to skip to the end and just get the kind of short version of that, there will be a summary at the end of the video. So we are going to start with the country that is most disaffected relative to the other top 10 countries in terms of 1.5 changes. It's important to note that almost all the GPs kind of gain in power relative to like the middling countries and the weak countries, but relative to each other is kind of what we're talking when we talk about the top 5 losers. And then in the middle of this, top 10 entire list, we are going to give some honorable mentions. And so the top 5 loser is the East India Company, which only has one singular state that has, iron and coal and wood all combined in a single state. And so this means that you will be paying more for construction on average than you would in 1.4, because while you have, a lot of states that have a decent amount of coal and a lot of states that have a decent amount of iron, you are not going to have these states together. And also you have a decent amount of states that have a lot of wood, but you just don't have the full package, and Hara is the only one that has everything. Also, you start on traditionalism, which you have to get off of ASAP, and it is not easy to get off of traditionalism. Customarily, you probably just force a rev and get off of it, but traditionalism importantly gives you minus 15% market price impact, and this is going to be painful. Now, it's not all, dreary, as it were, with the East India Company, because you do have some advantages. Namely, you have some really good states for building clothes in, because you will be building cotton, silk, and dyes all in one state, and you also have access to rice, which is currently really overtuned. The rice farm has double the inputs, double the outputs, double the labor required, but it does not have double the construction costs, so it's effectively 2 grain buildings for the price of 1, and so you do have that going for you. And you also have solid tech and lots of labor. Which is important in the context of population growth being diminished. Labor will be more valuable, and you do start off with good tech because you have access to one company, you have the very important stock exchange tech, and you start with railways. So you can do something straight like water tube boiler into maybe getting the other company, make some sort of judgment like this. You also have a couple of unique companies in the Great Indian Railway, which is, a kind of medium company. It's not very good for railway companies, but railway companies seem very strong. And Tata, which, while interesting, doesn't really seem to push it too much, but it will give you, max increased private construction allocation, which I think is a positive modifier, which is going to generally help you clear your investment pool faster. And so East India Company, though, most disaffected, largely on the back of you only have one state you can really, go to 15 construction and then feel good about it, and otherwise you're going to end up paying a lot more for construction as a result of the MAPI for the East India Company. Next up, we have the Ottoman Empire, which very easily could have been the very last place country because they actually have no states which have both iron and coal available. If we take a look here and just look at potentials, you see that this is all the iron here, and it notably is able to just kind of miss all of the coal potentials as well. There's no state that has access to iron and coal in the Ottoman Empire. Not only that, they are relatively backwards in terms of technology, and they need to do quite a bit to get railroads, and they have to probably start the game with the research of stock exchange. Now, that said, they will have an easier time going laissez-faire relative to the EIC because they start off with a railroaded local governor who is a moderate. And what you can do is currently you can cheese the moderate kind of thing because you can just click them. You can click exile dissident if they are out of government, and then as long as you have the Voice of the People DLC, you will be able to, after exiling these gentlemen, invite them back as an agitator, and they will switch to a different ideology, and it will be completely random. And so this means you can roll serfdom, and notably you can also roll market liberal. And so I think what the strategy might be is you rush moving forward, you rush stock exchange, first tech you research, then you re-roll this guy into a market liberal, then you invite them back to government, and then you put them in charge now that they're no longer a moderate, but instead a market liberal. Here we have a traditionalist, but you can assume it's a market liberal. You put them in charge of the government, and then you get rid of serfdom first thing. Normally at game start in 1.4, you will do this by getting an abolitionist who will support all of these changes, and then you get off of traditionalism as quick as you can. Laissez-faire in particular is quite nice because laissez-faire is going to give you access to an additional company, plus one max number of companies here. And so laissez-faire is going to be particularly strong, and Ottomans can roll, laissez-faire easier than most, and so this is going to be an advantage. But, it's not enough. They start on traditionalism, which is bad. It's bad than it was before because of tax. It's bad because of MAPI, and they don't have any gold or iron. So what's the saving grace that keeps them from last place? Well, they start with a lot of subjects, and there is a new interaction for reduce autonomy, which allows you to reduce the subject level. And doing this, they can kind of have a little bit of leg up relative to how they would normally be in terms of, putting their subjects into their, integrating their subjects in their entirety. It would have taken, it takes a little bit to get Wallachia, but once you have Wallachia, this does have both iron and coal. And while it doesn't have a lot of wood, eventually oil appears here, and it's kind of okay. You can high roll or re-roll, reducing autonomy on the event, whether or not you will you'd be able to get this event at game start and reduce their autonomy or be subjected to a war. And so, you can re-roll that if you want, with the idea that you're going to integrate Wallachia in 10 years, and you can integrate subjects a little bit better. You also generate a little bit more revenue if you high roll, getting both these guys in, something like this. Overall, though, I think Ottomans are no longer a top 10 country. I would have put them in the top 10, probably in 1.4, not so anymore. I think that these problems are significant enough that they get removed, and while the EIC, was an extremely powerful country, I think it was more disaffected in terms of relative power level, but I think Kebab is just also out of here, because they were kind of on the chopping block already, and the combination of not having a lot of tech, having MAPI struggles, and having traditionalism is really going to gum up their play. Although I do think they're an excellent kind of start because they have the sick man of Europe type of thing, or excellent in terms of interesting, especially for a beginner, and you're trying to get off of these, and there's some events and some local flavors, something like this. But I think that they are really hurt a lot by not having any states that are good for local prices. They do have some companies. Let's take a look at them. Okay, I'm not going to touch trying to pronounce their companies, but they have, this naval defense shipyards company, the tech speed for production here with combined with steel engines and guns, tech speed for production here combined with textile mills, explosive industry, and munitions. And then they also have this one for railways. They're all tied to Eastern Thrace specifically, and these companies, they're okay. They're not necessarily anything to really write home about, but they do have right next door in Attica, in a place where you could thematically expand or reasonably expand. There are some good companies here. These ones are kind of medium. The tech spread ones are probably maybe worth slotting in, but you're generally going to go for iron, coal, wood before you would any of these, despite tech spread actually being a decent, reasonable thing. So let's just take a close look at the Greek ones too. So there are these Greek companies in Basiliades and Koupas, which are very importantly giving you infrastructure, which is a nice modifier. But I think Koupas is really the one you would end up using, which is giving you railway building throughput and construction speed and throughput on tooling workshops, which is really, really good. And you kind of could reasonably expand here. And so since this is kind of in Ottoman spheres, we do give them a little bit of points for that. Also worth noting, if you wanted to do a religious run and you want to convert a lot, you do get 50% conversion on any sort of Muslim country now gets conversion. And also, I think this minus decree cost modifier is pretty good. I'm pretty sure all Muslims are getting this, but I do believe that this is actually a reasonable shout and is better than increased authority, especially if you stack it in with other things. Maybe it's kind of, so you are going to get a lot of things that positively give you authority percentage, but you're not going to get a lot of reductions in cost of authority. So playing the long game with a religious run, you will have access to more resources if you are planning to use a bunch of resource decrees, and this is maybe something interesting that you could do with Kebab, but overall, Kebab suffers as the second place loser. Okay, next up in third place loserville, we have Austria, who I think overall is a loser largely as a result of Mappy again, but we are going to be talking about their companies first, and they have okay middling companies, a couple companies you might actually use. We have Mav through down here. These 4 companies are all Austrian companies, and taking a look, railway building throughput is a nice modifier to have paired with the tooling workshops, and so this one is probably usable. The tooling workshops will occupy a large proportion of your economy, so getting throughput and construction speed on those will be nice. We're probably not going to end up using this munitions, war machines steel, especially with generic steel giving you 10% construction speed, and so this is probably not one to consider. And this one down here is probably not one to consider, although 10% defense is a nice modifier. A large proportion of your economy is probably not going to be tied down in arms industries and cannons industries unless they rebalance those very, very much. You don't build a lot of them, and you would rather have a larger proportion of your economy under company bonuses, but this Galatian Carpathian Petroleum Company does seem like one that is a bit better than Vanilla. The Vanilla Company, which gives, again, 10% migration, and this is giving 10% tooling workshops building throughput, 5% railway building throughput, and, of course, in on the oil. I think there are, some better oil companies, but this is a decent shout, and you will have access to a couple unique companies. Unfortunately, as far as interest groups go, you do have the unique aristocracy of the Austrians, which gives you 30% prestige instead of increased investment pool contribution efficiency, which I think this modifier is worse. And so overall, you are hurt. You do have the Catholic Church, so there will be some bifurcation amongst religion, which is the normal birth rate, which it can be something you're interested in. Austria does start out with reasonable tech and a large population, and so the population will be pretty nice. 34 million is nothing to sneeze at. European pops, I believe it's the second most populous European country, and so with the pop changes, having access to more pops will be nice. And also, the OK technology, they're not certainly hurting on technology. They will have access to 85 Mappy at the start of the game because they start with stock exchange and they don't start on traditionalism. And so, you will have to go for business bank and railroads kind of as per usual, but you also start with the atmospheric engine, and so you're in decent shape as far as the tech goes. But let's talk about the Mappy. Probably the best Mappy state to build in is either Bohemia, or there's like a couple over here. I think it might be northern Transylvania. There's a few over here that you can consider that might be decent, but you don't have any place that's better than just coal and iron, but you have a decent amount of coal and iron, and so very, very medium-ish kind of feeling from Austria. You don't have anything with coal, iron, and sulfur, or coal, iron, and lead, but you have enough smattering of coal, iron, coal and iron and wood that you can make use of this early on and have most of your construction sectors be fairly efficient early on in the game. And so this will feel pretty good. And so just overall kind of a medium solid start, but still going to be the third place loser for us here in patch 1.5. All right, next up we have Qing, which is one that has a lot of moving parts and is quite a bit interesting. I think it's important to note that, or re-emphasize, that we're talking about winners and losers in terms of where they are relative to their position before. And Qing, even though Qing is overall a loser in patch 1.5, they are still the best country in the game for rushing the 1 billion GDP as fast as possible, because they have access to the most important resource of all, human souls. And so this is easily the most important thing, and they have access to a ton of money. They get a ton of money through minting, and it's important to note that we're not saying that Qing is weak, but we're saying that the changes overall in 1.5 relative to the other top 10 countries disaffect Qing more. So let's talk about their companies first. They have this Kaiping mining company through the Jingzhen kilns, at least at this point in time. Again, expecting kind of more additions to this, but this is in the current sprint. We have the Kaiping mining company as the standout one. Hanyang Arsenal is an interesting one to think about. Morale recovery is not an interesting or not an easy modifier to come by, and in the context of China's unique interest groups, this might be one you would end up using, but I think for the most part you can forget about these, especially the kilns. Navy, again, might be useful depending on if they change anything up, but the Kaiping mining company is really good because throughput is really, really valuable on railways, as is construction speed. They occupy an enormous percentage of your construction queue throughout the game, and getting 35% construction or 20% construction on the railways is extremely strong, but also getting throughput on railways is really valuable, because generally railways have zero throughput, and so throughput is more valuable the less you have you have, because if you go from zero throughput to 20% throughput, you've increased the outputs by 20%, right? If you go from 100% or 100 throughput to plus 20% on top of that, it's only worth 10%. And so in particular, railway throughput is going to be really valuable, and it is one of 3 companies that gets access to a resource on top of a railway, and then tech spread is a decent modifier for Qing as well. And so this is going to be pretty good. Regarding their unique interest groups, I think they do have a really, really nice unique interest groups coming in, and this is one of the saving graces, I think, of kind of their changes, is they have the Confucian Scholars, which I think is better than pop growth for them, minus 50% radicals from standard of living decreases. So far playing with this, it has felt quite good, especially when you double the bonus, you make them happy, you get minus 100% radicals from standard of living decreases. So you get no radicals from standard of living decreases. It's really hard to generate radicalism. It's generally in lower rung pops, though, that are getting this modifier, so it's not the case that you're getting an enormous amount of approval rating off the back of this, but it still, I think, is going to be better than Be Fruitful and Multiply for Qing specifically, although maybe if you're trying to do an absolute maximum GDP run, this is a little bit worse, but I think through most phases of the game it's going to be better. The other very interesting interest group is minus military goods cost, and this is a free money modifier. The military goods are still getting purchased in your economy, you're just paying less than them, and so the difference between the two, so for example, if this is doubled and we have minus 50% military goods cost, then what will be happening is we will be buying from wherever they're being purchased from. The buy orders will still happen at the normal price, but we pay half for them, and that difference is free stimulus into the economy. So late game, if you're trying to really stimulate the economy, and especially if there's going to be even more mobilization choices in terms of options that you can, activate in order to have more consumption, this modifier might be insanely good. Still requires a little bit of testing and seeing where 1.5 goes, but this is, I believe, a win, and it comes at the expense not of the military research speed, but of the 15% offense and defense, which, is something you're giving up, but it is going to be something nice. So this is kind of unique companies and interest groups for Qing. Overall, I think that they are a winner in kind of that spread, but there are a lot of countries with really good companies. It just really helps that the Kaiping Mining Company, which is one of the best companies, you're getting it so fast. Now you suffer because it's harder for you to acquire other really good companies, which are generally European, because it's 20-year incorporation time. But at the same time, they need that to incorporate on the Kaiping Mining Company. You'll probably use this, the generic iron company, and the generic steel company, and that'll be your kind of first 3 slots. Now, how else are they affected? Well, their MAPI score and their tech, they have some problems. They have very significant problems. They start without, access to stock exchange. So this is going to be the first thing you research for the plus 10 MAPI, but they also start on traditionalism, which hurts. So they have to get off of that as quickly as possible. So that's actually not the first research. And they don't have railways, which is going to be an important one, especially as you're trying to build local economies wide. You don't just want to put construction sectors everywhere. And so they're going to this is going to hurt them. I think the research order is you go romanticism into stock exchange, or only one or the other if the other one's not spreading, and then you start your research either into lathes or atmospheric engine, leaving a little bit unresearched, and then switching back to cotton gin lathes, something like this in terms of your research. But what they do have is their unique interest group, the scholar officials, in terms of what they approve of. They're more okay with you going for what is it? Not aristocracy. They're more okay with you swapping off of traditionalism and going agrarianism. So I think the opening step is go agrarianism with Qing, which actually feels pretty good, having experimented with it a little bit, because the investment pool weekly change from reinvestment, most of it is subsistence rice paddies, which are modified by the aristocrat contribution efficiency. So agrarianism, in terms of developing an investment pool in the early game, is actually incredibly strong. And once you get on agrarianism, you get rid of this market access price impact negative modifier. It is not present on agrarianism. So I think the opener is going for agrarianism, and so you can kind of handle your MAPI in a somewhat efficient way by going romanticism into stock exchange, and then you'll get on 85 MAPI, which is what the Europeans start with. However, in terms of MAPI states, you're in a bit of a weird spot. You have some of the best MAPI states in the game as Great Qing, but you don't have an enormous sum of them, and Great Qing normally builds more construction sectors than anyone else at the very game start. And so the question is are you going to run out of MAPI states faster, or are you more disaffected by running out of MAPI states faster than these other countries, these other top 10 countries? And I think the answer is yes. You have some of the very best MAPI states in the game, but you're going to run out of them. For example, Shaanxi has iron, coal, wood, and sulfur. All the Manchurian states, we have northern Manchuria, coal, iron, logging camps, but this is 34 logging camps, which is insane. Southern Manchuria has iron, coal, lead, and ton of logging again. Outer Manchuria, ton of logging, iron, coal, and gold appears here, so you're going to want to build here anyways, and so you're going to get to double dip on having gold and then getting tools in the same spot as gold, where you also have steel and coal and this stuff. And then also you have Yunnan, which has iron, coal, logging camps, but this is kind of, now you're running out of places that have iron, and coal. I think that's actually it for places that have iron and coal. Just the Manchurias, Shaanxi, and Yunnan here. Yunnan very notably does have access to rice farms as well. So this is a big plus for Qing that was similar to EIC. You have access to the OP rice farms, which have double the inputs, double the outputs, double the labor, but are not double the construction costs, so it's 2 buildings for the price of 1. You will also be able to produce silk really, really efficiently, and cotton, and so you'll be able to do clothes. You notably do have the unique, tech for silk, which normally other countries can kind of make use of just by importing it from you, but that is less the case because imports are effectively reduced in value from MAPI, and you have access to sericulture yourself, so this is a positive effect, but you're going to run out of MAPI states really, really quick. You generally open with building like 60 construction sectors, and if we build 60 construction sectors, we slap down 15 in Yunnan, 15 in, Hebei I think also has, 15 here, 15 here, 15 here, we have 90 construction sectors we can build that are going to have iron and coal and logging and then we're basically out. Then we're done. And so you are very quickly going to run out. Also, I don't think you want to slap down 15 anymore because these take now 2 infrastructure. They cost 2 infrastructure, and so you're disaffected by a change in 1.4 specifically as it relates to, transitioning here. You want all your construction sectors in one place, but it's going to be forever until you have railways. And so you might not even want to build like that, and so you might suffer, at least initially, from the map. But then once you get onto railways, you do have one of the better railway companies. You also, have a situation where you have a lot of population. You have souls, and souls are really good. They are really good, and it is going to be harder to get them overall throughout the game, and so on that front, you do benefit quite a bit more. And also, there's another thing that has been in the back of my mind is, as Navy improves, I think this benefits Qing, because the main barrier to entry for Navy is money. Qing can generate enormous amounts of money because they generate enormous amount of minting, 125k from minting here. So that almost seems incorrect, but we're generating a ton of money from minting, because of our really high starting GDP. And this GDP will crank up even more once we get more mappy, just off the back of prices improving for things. And so this is going to allow us to generate a large navy. The only difference between our boats and, Great Britain's boats is the speed at which they recruit at this current point in time. I think they have power of the purse, but our military PMs at this juncture, at this sprint in 1.5, we have the same military PMs, and so we can add a navy fairly quickly, and I think this will be really valuable on 2 fronts. One, navies are going to be important, and it's going to allow you to attack and defend very efficiently, and the main barrier to entry is cost, is money, and Qing has a ton of that, and so you can somehow, I think, supplement the fact that you have really bad army PMs by the fact that your navy's going to be reasonably strong. That's thing one. But thing two, I think navy's going to be increasingly important, because I think having a lot of native interests are going to be important, or having a lot of interests is going to be important because of the reverse sway mechanic. It will give you more opportunities to interfere in stuff politically, get involved in multiple wars simultaneously, sway people to become protectorates, this type of thing. And so I think Qing benefits from that. But overall, I do think Qing is a loser as a result of starting backward in tech, not having access to enough mappy states, even though it has access to some of the very best ones. Like, you can argue Shaanxi and Southern Manchuria are among the very best mappy states, because we have so much logging, and we have all these pops and benefits. Here we can also build clothes very effectively because they have silk and cotton. Hebei, I think, also has access to cotton and silk. These are not things that many other states have, but despite this, not a large percentage of your stuff is good mappy. Normally what you would do in 1.4 is you crank up really high in Shaanxi, and it supports the rest of your country, and you can't do this because it has to support local economies. And so we have Qing as our sort of, I believe, 4th place loser here, which is almost kind of middling, but not quite middling in terms of improvement relative to the other top 10 countries. Finally, as the 5th place loser, and this one was really hard to judge whether it was a winner or a loser, we have Prussia, which is incredibly straightforward. The companies overall in Prussia are not that good, but they are interesting because you do have access to Rheinmetall, this company, not going to try and pronounce everything, and I'm definitely not going to try and pronounce that. The railway companies in general are okay. I'm not sure this is necessarily better than generic railways. And then here we have access to, army offense and defense, which is an interesting modifier, but not the best industries to have it on. And we also have, Friedrich Krupp, which is another company, but not the best companies to have on, especially generic steel mills seems like one of the better companies right now because it gives 10% construction as its prosperity bonus. And so you can get something like 10% kill rate, railways, building throughput, use offense and defense, and get generic offense as well. And you can have a bunch of companies that give you military benefits. But overall, I think this is not going to be very good, especially in the context of single player. Multiplayer, maybe you start playing around with these specifically, but not a large share of your economy is going to be under these companies, right? And so when you put these in, you are not benefiting as much from throughput or construction speed if it's a smaller share of your economy that is tied up in artillery and arms industries and munitions plants and these types of things, explosives. This is artillery again. When you have overlap, it's inefficient. And so overall, I really don't think the companies are very good. You don't have any unique interest groups, if I recall correctly, in terms of their bonuses, and malices, but what you do have is the evangelical church, which I think the 5% company throughput bonus, I think that's a little bit better than Be Fruitful and Multiply, but it's pretty close. And so overall you're middling. What you have with Prussia is very straightforward in terms of your benefits. You have the best tech at game start. You are tied for the best tech tree, which means you will have access to 2 companies at game start, reasonable laws that you can kind of get into at a reasonable click. You can get into laissez-faire. If you have monarchy, autocracy, you don't have the best laws, but you can reasonably get there in terms of getting better laws. Laissez-faire, of course, for the additional companies. So you can have 3 companies very, very early on, and you have some of the best mappy states in the game. Silesia, I think, is the second best mappy state in the entire game, and you can build tall here. You also have Westphalia, very strong. You have, not Ruhr's okay. North Rhine is, I think, a little bit better. Saxony you will eventually have, which is very, very strong as well. One of the best sulfur, states in the game. And there's just almost everywhere you build, Brunswick has access to, coal, iron, and or just a large percentage of where you're building is going to have access to this coal, iron, and wood, and especially in decent enough numbers on the wood. 14 is nothing to sneeze at. Westphalia, 22, and so you really are in a good place, both technologically and in terms of the mappy, and so you're looking really, really good. You just don't have anything standoutish in terms of the companies, as well as your unique interest groups, and so overall a slight loser because there's other countries that have really, really good companies, and we're going to get into that in just a second here. Before we get into the winners, I wanted to talk about Belgium as well as some other countries, just kind of briefly touching on them. Belgium, I think, takes Kebab's spot as now the 10th place country, following 1.5. They have unique companies that are very strong. This company, Ducongo, I think is the strongest wood company because it's paired both wood and iron instead of generic wood and rubber, which would give infrastructure as its prosperity bonus. But I think getting the extra throughput on iron is particularly useful, as well as construction speed. It will require you get rubber, so you do get it a bit late. Also notable is the railway company paired with the engines. It's decent. It's, I think, a lot better than just a generic railway company, and 5% infrastructure is nothing to sneeze at. But the really, really good one here is the Society Anonyme John Cockrell, which is giving you tooling workshops, steel, and engines, and all 3 of these together are pretty good because it occupies a generally large portion of what you're constructing, so you're getting 35% construction or however much percent construction on that, but 10% railway throughput as a prosperity bonus is incredibly strong. It's one of the better prosperity bonuses, and you can think of, this requires that you have in particular Wallonia or Flanders, and it has steel mills greater than level 10. So most of the time you are going to, as Prussia, want to, get this for yourself, or as France, get this for yourself, or as anybody go hunting for Belgium. Also, Belgium has what is kind of almost tied with Silesia in terms of one of the best mappy states, and it didn't used to have sulfur, and now it does have sulfur, and so really, really huge winner in Belgium is a company that or a country you have to consider now. Just kind of briefly touching on a few of the, top countries that did not get mentioned that I think a lot of people like to play is Japan. In particular, does not have a single state that is they have some decent companies, but they don't have any state that has both coal and iron in it, and so they really suffer, except for Hokkaido, which has like 2,000 pops or something, which doesn't have enough pops to do anything, and they start with no migration controls, so they can't get pops there. So I think Japan suffers quite a bit, again, also with backward technology. And then we have, nations that can form Italy, but generally speaking, I don't think that they have any states that have iron and coal combined together. Tuscany might. No, they just have a lot of iron, and so you are going to kind of have a little bit of trouble, except for right here. Piedmont specifically does have iron and coal. This is the only one, and it's kind of meh, and so maybe not necessarily something to really write home about. Anything in the Middle East doesn't have a lot of wood and really, really, really suffers. Countries like Brazil will be decent, but I think that they only have 1 or 2 places. Actually, I don't think they have a single place. Okay, it's this. This is like the one place that they have that has decent mappy, and it's just important to note that, the GPs overall are the winners relative to all the countries you can pick, but relative to each other, we do have to pick some winners and losers, which is kind of weird how we can put Prussia as a loser, even though it has some of the best mappy and tech in the game, and it's just as a consequence of we're having to compare these GPs to each other. But I did definitely want to note Belgium, I think, is now in the top 10, alongside Spain is kind of the 9-10, with the other 8 being way out in front of these two, and you can make an argument for other ones that should maybe be instead of Belgium and Spain, but I think it's Belgium and Spain. And just wanted to note, really big come up from the mappy here, because you can build everything localized on Belgium. Next up, we have the USA in the 5th place winner slot, and the biggest thing to write home about them is the companies. They have what I think is the best company in the game, and then also the 3rd best company in the game, maybe. And, with companies, it's much better to have the best stuff and some bad stuff than it is to have a bunch of middling stuff, because you can use generic companies, you can catch companies from around the world, as we kind of discussed a little bit with Greece and Belgium. And so let's talk through the American companies, which are the big thing to write home about them. We have Standard Oil, which is the best oil company in slot, and it's the best railway company in slot, and the prosperity bonus is 20% railway building throughput currently. Now, right now in this exact iteration of the beta, you actually can't activate this, but with this bonus, if you could activate it, this would be the best company in the game, I think, and just very strong looking railway building throughput. Again, we mentioned it before, because there's no throughput on it, it is going to be the most valuable thing to get throughput on, and then getting construction on railways is really important, because as a fraction of your overall construction queue, railways will occupy a really big slot. Important to kind of maybe make note of is the United Fruit Company is probably the best for an agrarian run, and it is tied to the American Yankee or Dixie culture. You have to have one of the two, and so you cannot conquer places in America in order to get the United Fruit Company. Like you can with Standard Oil, you cannot take over the United Fruit Company. No way. And so this is going to be important to note. Now, I don't think agrarian run is worth doing, but maybe super late game, this is the best in slot, as a result of 20% plantations throughput. That's on all plantations. That's silk, cotton, dyes, fruit, tobacco, opium, just like the biggest, overall kind of bonus of throughput on this type of thing. Now, you do get -4 rural folk approval, but this one is interesting. I don't think you use it very often, but again, interesting. Next up is Carnegie Steel, which I think is one of the better companies in the game, especially in the early game, getting access to coal and iron on the same kind of thing, in addition to steel. And again, we see this railway building throughput modifier. So if you have Carnegie Steel and Standard Oil, you can have 50% railway building throughput. That's a lot of throughput, and that's without eating any inefficiency by using 2 railway companies. You can then use another railway company and get up to 60%, but that's probably not worth it. General Electric, don't think it's worth using. William Cramp & Sons, don't think it's worth using. Ford Motor Co., don't think it's worth using. None of these will be a large enough percentage of your overall economy that you want to be using them, although General Electric may be kind of the best power plant-oriented company. Probably not. Nokia's probably a little bit better. We'll talk about Nokia when we talk about Russia, but I just wanted to point all these out. Now, the USA, excellent on the tech. They start with the highest tier tech as in the game, and so this will be really good. You probably just slap down water tube and then go towards whatever you fancy after that, and so USA is going to be really good on the tech. The mappy is overall very solid. I think their best mappy state is Pennsylvania. Very solid amount of logging camps, iron mines, coal mines, and then later on in the game they will benefit from New York with the electricity building output, which is going to be nice for their individual mappy. However, relative to 1.4, now electricity is a local good. And so this actually hurts USA a ton. So, I mean, they have the best company, but, the state of New York has gotten so much worse relative to 1.4, and I think this is important to note when evaluating the USA. Despite having the best companies, this hurts a lot because now New York is only providing electricity for New York as of this iteration of the beta, and I think that this is worth knowing. They do have a ton of states, though, as far as mappy goes, that have a coal bonus and have coal and iron, just really a lot, and a lot of these states are also going to have, we see all these coal states, a lot of these have iron as well, and we have a lot of hardwood output modifiers, which is pretty strong, but hardwood kind of floods the market anyways. The next best mappy state is probably Alabama, which has lead, logging, iron, and coal, but doesn't have some of these stronger modifiers in the coal mines building throughput that Pennsylvania has. Also very notable for the USA is going to be the fact that you are kind of railroaded into getting a lot of gold, and as an industry relative to other industries, gold is less disaffected by overall economic changes, and so when you get New York, you're going to be able to build, you're going to be able to build gold mines there, and then that will feed nicely into tools. They have a decent amount of logging. They have a logging throughput on these, and so that you are kind of shoehorned into getting gold naturally is also going to be a huge benefit to the USA, and also with navies becoming more important. USA does start off with, I think this is the third largest navy. If it's not the third largest, it might be behind Russia. I'm not 100% sure, but they are in a unique geographic position where there's no GPs in contiguous next to them. I mean, you will maybe have to fight, the UK as kind of your only threat, but I think you can build up a relatively large navy and then feel safe as the USA, kind of relative to maybe what is 1.4. And this is something worth considering. It's going to depend how this beta starts shaking out, because we don't have naval combat in here yet. But, the thing to write home about with the USA is definitely their companies are extraordinarily strong. They have decent MAPI, probably not as good as Prussia did, but they also, suffer quite a lot at the fact that, they have really good companies, but they suffer a lot at the fact that New York as a beacon of electricity is basically gone. And so this is not going to be an option for them anymore. But other than that, very solid with the gold and all these really strong companies, especially Standard Oil. Also worth noting on the USA is the patrician philanthropy in their Southern Planters interest group, which gives prestige and loyalists from standard of living increases. Now, I'm not sure if this is better or worse than, the investment pool contribution, but it is an interesting one, especially because, 100% loyalists from standard of living increases, this might be really strong. It might be really good at generating approval in interest groups. This is something I would need to test, but it is an important one to note for the USA. Next up, as the fourth place winner, we have Russia, which has access to a ton of unique companies here. And so we're just going to talk about the big ones. We have New Russia Company Limited, which is one of these iron, coal, steel companies, which is pretty strong. Again, giving railway building throughput. I think this one is a little bit better than Carnegie Steel, because I think industrialist +4 approval is better than shipyards, but otherwise it's the same and very strong in the early game, although maybe is not one you even end up using. We'll talk about that in a second. Then we have Branobel, which is strictly better than the generic oil company because it's giving 5% railway building throughput on top of the 10% migration that you get from Azerbaijan. And then we have, this company, which, of the companies where, you're getting ships, military shipyards, artillery, motor, these are not the best industries, but 5% infrastructure and 10% railway building throughput. These are pretty solid modifiers. I'm not sure you slot this in. You also have the vodka monopoly, the arms plant, this one. And then we have to scroll up a little bit to take a look at some of the other ones that are very important to be noting. I think the big one being Nokia, but also this up here as well, where we have this Lilpop, Rao, and whatever. This is in Mazovia and Greater Poland. It is nice to have both iron and tools on the same company. So this is one that's maybe you end up using not the best prosperity bonus for motor industries throughput, but it is interesting. Ursus, not worth using. 20% wheat farms building throughput. This is not a wheat meta. You build rice, and the rice is nice, and it should suffice for all your grain needs, and so you're not going to build anything but rice. But Nokia is going to be the best in slot for a wood company, I think. It's either this or the wood and rubber company, but I think that getting the throughput on the power plants, specifically in the early game, is going to be significantly better. Now, maybe super late game, the throughput on the rubber will be more worth it because it's a resource, but electric industries, the synthetics plant throughput and the electric industries throughput is much less to write home about than you have something with logging and power plants, which at least in the mid to late-ish game is going to be better, outperform the generic wood company. Really, the important one, though, is kind of down here, where we're getting the iron, the coal, and the other thing all on the same spot. Where is it? We skipped it. Darn it, we skipped it. But it was giving iron, coal, and steel. Now, maybe if you end up using this one in order to get the tools bonus, then you aren't going to use iron, coal, steel, because this already has iron and steel here. And so as far as, you know, what's on your company goes, these are really good things to have on your company. And so maybe you pair this, you know, with the Shangzi Rail Company, which we had talked about, the Kaiping Mining Company, which gives railways and also coal. And so as a strategy, you know, integrating this and then using this other company, which is going to give tools as well, is maybe the strategy you end up using instead of using the tools, coal, steel company that's giving you 10% rail throughput. I think this would be a little bit better, and so that's why I said maybe you make a bit of a different strategy, but you're taking this off of China by taking Hebei. At least right now, it requires taking Hebei. The text seems to imply that you could also take, just Beijing, but this is not currently how the game works. Okay, so let's talk about the rest of Russia. So Russia, in my opinion, has the best mappy states in the game, like the very best, but they don't necessarily have a really high density of them. So to that extent, I guess they suffer in the same way Qing does, but I think Perm's the best state in the game. It only has coal and iron, and I know what you're saying, coal, iron, logging. Well, it has enough of these, and it has these bonuses. 20% iron mines building throughput, very rare bonus, and 20% logging industry throughput. And so these all combined is going to make Russia's, very, very nice on this front. They are also going to have iron mine building throughput and on here in Ural, and also have all this as well. So Ural and Perm are going to be like the two best states in the game for this front. Also, what will appear in Perm will be oil. To be fair, a bunch of oil appears in the USA later, and is it worth noting they also have really good states. In Moscow they have iron, coal logging. They have it in Luhansk, iron, coal logging. They have it in Transbaikal, Irkutsk and Transbaikal, iron, coal logging, and here they have iron, coal, sulfur logging, and so they really have a lot of these states in the northern border here. And you will often be taking Manchuria kind of with your normal texture, which is where Qing's best, kind of mappy states are. And while it doesn't cover your entire country, it's important to note you are going to make better use out of the logging company at the game start than any other country because, one, you don't start with railroads, your tech isn't overall not that good, and it does give infrastructure at the game start for the generic logging company, but you have all this logging, and so I think specializing in logging is... you can still try and export it. It's not quite as good as 1.4 maybe, but it is going to be, particularly nice that you have it in all these areas, and so I think you will benefit a lot from the generic logging company, which is, other countries won't really benefit anywhere near as much as you will from this generic logging company, which is going to give you also extra infrastructure to cover it. Now, on top of this, we don't have the best tech. We're behind in tech. We will have to go, stock exchange first, into going for railroads, into maybe getting companies. So this is a negative. Also, you have negative IGs. Like overall, I think your IG is bad because you have this IG, which is going to give agricultural tax income instead, and your rural folk will also give agricultural tax income. I think the other modifiers are better. Increasing taxes isn't all that great. You just take more money from your pops. It's not a money creating multiplier in the same way that investment pool contribution is. So I don't think these are very good. And so this is just kind of important to note. But what Russia does have an advantage in is this air situation where their air, they can get into government fairly easy. So what you have to do is you have to exile every other gentry assembly, army and fleet leader. You have to get this guy a royal marriage once he turns 18, and then you have to piss off the gentry assembly such that you can use this step down, abdicate the throne interaction, and then this guy will become the leader. Then you grant him command. And once he has command, and he's the only general assigned to the gentry assembly, and he has positive popularity, when you take this guy out, and then you take this gentleman out, and this is similar to what we demonstrated with Kebab, and you exile this guy, the guy who will come to power as leader of the interest group will not be this royalist, but will instead be your heir who is the market liberal. And so Russia, relative to other countries, can get onto laissez-faire really, really, really fast, and laissez-faire has extra value. And to some extent, Russia makes a little bit of catch-up in this regard, on this back. In addition to having the really, really good mappy, they can go laissez-faire really, really fast. as a result of this interaction. You do, of course, have to get rid of serfdom first. I'm not sure whether going tenant farmers or homesteading is better, because you will struggle after this with your Orthodox Church quite a bit, which is a unique interest group to Russia, which has always been the case, but they're kind of hard to pass through some things through them, namely getting rid of autocracy. But this is kind of a normal Russia thing. And so with Russia, they have really, really good companies, really, really good mappy, and they can get laissez-faire really, really fast. But they suffer because their tech is not all that great. They do have a decent-sized navy at game start. What is this? This is actually either the second or the third biggest navy, because we have 55 ships. I think it's a little bit smaller than France's, and so those will be kind of useful. And you do start out with kind of some useful adjacencies, but you've always had these where you're adjacent to Great Qing, you're adjacent to, this is kind of normal Russia stuff. But as far as 1.5 changes, really nice mappy, which is going to be particularly nice. And then we also have access to some really good companies, even though our interest groups are probably worse. You can make an argument, Russia, Prussia, USA, they're kind of all hard to sort, in my opinion, as well as the next one, regards to where they are. But I think Russia belongs here in the 4th place winner slot for, having the best mappy states in the game, in my opinion. Next up, we have Spain in the 3rd place slot, and Spain is relatively straightforward in terms of how they have benefited a lot from 1.5. First of all, they have this company that's starting to look familiar, or a company kind of profile that's starting to look familiar, iron, coal, steel, enduro y campania. But this is available notably just as soon as you get coal mines up to level 10, so it is the easiest to unlock company that is giving you steel, coal, and iron. And so you're almost certainly going to want to build the coal up there relatively early in order to unlock this company, and then you're going to be able to follow that up with fast iron. Their other companies are not as good. Altos Hornzos de Viscancia. This is maybe the plus 10 infrastructure is something you're interested in, especially before you get railroads. This is maybe going to be like a temporary thing, but by the time you ramp up the prosperity bonus, maybe it doesn't work out. In terms of tech, you're relatively middling. You probably open it with stock exchange, but you don't have to go cotton gin into lathe. And so this is a little bit better, and you have, a little bit more of this kind of early tech, but you are a little bit behind. You are also going to benefit a little bit from the reduce, the subject changes, I think, or maybe you don't have any subjects that are not puppets. If you don't have any subjects, I guess you don't have any subjects that aren't puppets, and so you won't really benefit too much from the reduced autonomy changes. But what's really the thing to write home about is the mappy is so improved on Spain, and this is because, okay, they have a decent amount of mappy states here, Valencia, these here, and so in terms of a proportion of their countries, they have a ton of mappy states, but this Navarra is here where we're writing home about. Logging, it's okay. Coal mines, good. Iron mines, it is one of the only places in the game that has this 20% iron mines building throughput. And if I recall correctly, they used to have an infrastructure malice here. It might have been here, and they went from having an infrastructure malice to having one of the best bonuses in the game in terms of iron throughput. And so this benefit is greatly changed. Also discoverable resources. If I'm not sure if that's gold or oil, but this 20% iron mines building throughput is just an enormous jump from where they were before to where they are now, and they do have access to one of the better company archetypes in the coal, steel, iron as well. So I think they've benefited just enormously from where they were before. Now, it's important to note, we're not saying that Spain is the 3rd place country. They're not anywhere close to the 3rd place. They're either 9th or 10th. But they have jumped up, relative to the other countries in the scrum quite a lot by getting access to what is kind of the best state to build in early. And your economy is small enough that you actually can build almost all of your economy here in Navarra, and almost all your economy will be benefiting from the iron mine building throughput, at least at the opening, which is not the case with Russia. Like, Perm is only so big a percentage of your economy, and while Perm is better as a state, because it's also got this logging industry throughput, Perm is significantly better, right? Because Spain can't afford anywhere near like the level of construction sectors as Russia, you're going to have a higher percentage of your construction sectors under these really, really good conditions. And so Spain is a particularly big come up on the back of the company and the other stuff. They don't have anything crazy in terms of interest groups, from what I can recall, but they do have the be fruitful and multiply kind of modifier, which you you either have the Catholic or the Protestant. You know, the U.S. had the Protestant modifier. France is going to have the Catholic modifier. Great Britain, the Protestant. You know, mostly, etc. But yeah, the really benefited from the change to specifically this single state in Navarra, and as a result, we're putting them in third place. All right, in second place we have France. Now, France's companies are kind of okay. They will have access to, you know, the Belgium company relatively early that requires conquering Wallonia. They are railroaded into that, and this company will give you motors, steel, and tools, and will give you 10% throughput on the railways as its prosperity bonus. So this is quite good, and so you can almost consider it a French company. They certainly will, and so this will be pretty good. Also, you have this company which you're going to be getting from Constantine, which is a place you're going to be conquering, which is maybe going to be a little bit better than the generic steel company, because you'll be getting a 10% colony growth in non-homeland states, which is roughly the equivalent of one level of the institution. So this one's kind of important to note. But other than that, overall, the companies don't look that good. You have the Schneider and Chi. This is going to be minus morale loss plus morale recovery. This is probably an okay modifier, but this is not going to be a huge percentage of your economy. Although as far as military ones go, having steel and motors on top of artillery is maybe a little bit better than average, and so they have that going for them. You know, this company is interesting. I think this is the only one that gives assimilation, which is again interesting, but overall it's not going to be that much to write home about. This company is not very good, this company is not very good, and this company is not very good, and I think this is the last French company in the low counties, which is coal and gives railway building throughput. And while this is interesting, it's not going to be as good as you know, the Kaiping mining company, which you probably want to take off of Qing. And so overall, the company's not that much to write home about. What is something to write home about is the unique interest group changes to France. Now, these are locked behind the Voice of the People DLC, but there's a total of 6, and it is the most changed interest groups. There's a couple of them are bad, but for the most part, they have the most insane interest group bonus. So let's just kind of quickly go through the worst ones before we go to the insane one. This one's kind of medium, plus 5% political strength. On the trade unionist is unique. The actively bad modifier isn't in the intelligentsia, where you're losing migration attraction and instead getting prestige. That is just bad. That is going to be negative. I believe that you have, what's the other one here? It's not rural folk. It's not... Okay, I know you have 2 changes to the petite bourgeoisie here, which is going to be you are getting minus state penalties from turmoil and plus 50% loyalist, which isn't quite as good as interest rate, but the interest rate is on the second one instead. And so these are the 4 of these changes, and so these are pretty good. I think that overall the petite bourgeoisie is quite a lot stronger under France relative to vanilla. And then also you're getting armed forces. Instead of 15% offense and defense, you're getting 50% offense, which is probably better for single player, worse for multiplayer. Defense is going to probably be a more useful modifier in multiplayer, but offense will let you finish wars faster. Doubled plus 50% offense, that's a little spooky. You will be able to push really well. And finally, the best bonus, the last bonus we have to talk about, is this 10% state construction efficiency bonus, which just seems disgustingly overtuned at this point in time. And remember, we're just in the first iteration. This might be nerfed by the time you watch this video, depending on when you watch this video. But 10% state construction efficiency is an absolutely insane modifier. You know, you can think of construction as your GDP growth, and so 10% increased GDP growth rate is just way better than everything else. And you can double it to make it 20% because you can make these guys powerful. And so this is the biggest thing to write home about, and just absolutely insane. You know, you can make an argument that France is going to be what you can now infer the first place is going to be UK. You can make an argument that France is ahead of UK as a result of this bonus. This bonus is just absolutely enormous. You know, I mean, I can't emphasize enough that this is just disgusting. But let's talk about kind of the rest of what France is going on. They have a decent amount of pops, so you're not going to run out of pops really fast. They also have tier 1 tech, so you are going to be able to kind of do what you want in terms of the tech, probably water tube boilers into whatever you feel like doing, and so they are going to be in really, really good shape in this regard. They will have access to 2 companies at game start, and also they will start with the Orleanist kind of event chain where they can, you know, turn this guy. They have a unique interaction. Don't we have a unique interaction? I thought we had the unique interaction to change someone. I guess the AI used this, but we want to put the Orleanists in power, for example, and the Orleanists specifically will support laissez-faire. And so they are another country that's very easy to quickly go to laissez-faire on. And so this is going to benefit them a lot because you will have access to kind of 3 companies very, very early on. You can actually slot in a couple companies at the game start, which is going to be, you know, somewhat nice, but not like any craziness. And as far as mappy states, you make out okay. You know, you're not as good as Prussia, USA, Russia, in my opinion, or the UK, but you do have access to Rhone, which is very, very solid. You know, it has a ton of coal, iron. It has coal bonus. It doesn't have a 51 iron, which makes it suffer a little bit. Sufficient logging, and it is one of the few places in Europe that is going to have access to cotton and silk, and so you can build clothing pretty well here. Alsace-Lorraine is going to be one of the better states as well, which has more iron. It also has coal. It has coal bonus. It has logging camps, and then Lorraine is also kind of okay. It doesn't have iron and coal. I know there's another iron and coal one here. Yeah, it's right here, but again, not really super high on the iron levels. You do conquer Constantine, which is one of the few states that has a 20% iron bonus, but it's on top of state constriction, efficiency, malice. And so, you know, while it is a decently mappy state and you're kind of railroaded into it, this will be okay. You will conquer Wallonia eventually. I believe you will accept the Pops eventually. If it becomes a primary culture, you do get access to the best company in the game in terms of wood, which is going to give you wood, iron, rubber, and that is in is the unique for Belgium, but it requires Wallonian primary culture. I can't remember if you make primary culture Wallonian as part of your event chain in France, but if you do, that's going to be really good, and you will conquer Wallonia, and so you will have access to some additional mappy if you do the natural borders of France journal entry. But just to emphasize, cannot emphasize enough, the thing here is this state construction efficiency is obscene, and you can make a very strong argument that this alone just takes them to the #1 slot, but for now we're going to have them as second place winner, France, in here. Finally, in first place, we have the UK, which is quite powerful, but to be fair, partially this concern is, I think we mentioned we were mainly concerned with single player with this ranking, but, you know, if you consider multiplayer, just huge come up for the UK, and if you don't consider multiplayer, maybe France deserves the #1 slot, but at the very least, UK would deserve the #2 slot. Let's talk about their companies very briefly. They have the J&P Coates Company, Armstrong Whitworth, John and Brown Company, which are overall not that great. You know, 10% convoys is an interesting modifier, but the companies associated with it, or the industries, just not that good. But Balkow, Vaughan & Co., very strong company. We're going to have access to, you know, iron, coal, and steel. Now, steel does, to some degree, we've mentioned it in a couple spots, the generic steel company is incredibly strong and is perhaps worth writing home about, and maybe this is one of the reasons why this company archetype suffers a little, because generic steel is so good. But if generic steel somehow gets nerfed at some point in time, which I think would be reasonable, then this would get a lot better. This is the generic steel company, British Steel. It will be called whatever algorithmic thing for whatever company, so it would be French Steel for France. 10% state construction efficiency, very strong modifier, as we talked about with France. But they also have access to the Great Western Railway, as well as, I believe, a couple of the EIC companies, which are associated with EIC territories, but you can establish them if you are an overlord of someone. So we can establish the East India Company as one of our companies. Great Western Railway, it's okay for a railway company, I suppose. Pretty middling. I don't believe there's a generic railway company at this point in time, or I checked and I couldn't find one. And so this will be, you know, something that maybe interests you and is maybe worth putting in, especially as you start to build a lot of railways and you run out of infrastructure. Okay, so this is kind of where you're at with the companies, and so, well, why is the UK good? Well, the UK also has a really pushed interest group, and that is the petite bourgeoisie that they have received. This, instead of giving 10% bureaucracy, is giving 5% bureaucracy and 50% authority. That's 5-0. That is an insane bonus, and I think overall it's not worth playing specifically to appease the petite bourgeoisie, but there are going to be several phases in the game where you can generate a ton more authority off their back of these guys, and maybe you want to lean into them a little bit. It's probably not worth trying to get them powerful, but you could try. And they also have, instead of 10% loan interest rate, 15% loan interest rate. And if you double this modifier, you will pay 0% interest on loans. You will pay nothing for loans if you're also on laissez-faire and you're still a GP. And so this is very, very, very strong as well, which means you can absolutely crank construction to the max. There's also a lot of other changes, particular to 1.5, that I think benefit the UK a lot. The number one kind of biggest one is going to be the importance of navies is going to rise. We haven't seen all of the changes implemented yet, but they are changing, like the double landing, the triple landings. You no longer need just 5 boats and a Dreams to do stuff, and UK has more than enough boats to do stuff at the start of the game. Also associated with this is the reverse sway mechanic. Whenever anyone else starts to play, you can try and reverse sway your way in, and the UK starts with enough available interest to put in interest everywhere at the very start of the game, I think. And if not everywhere, you're just short 1 or 2. So you're short 3 here. And so you can put in interest almost everywhere at the start of the game, so you can start thumbing pies immediately at your leisure. And these, I think, are very, 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 very significant buffs, that I can't really, fully explain all the effects of, because we are at a current branch of the 1.5 where, not everything is in effect yet, but I think UK will be able to leverage its starting navy very, very, very strongly, especially in the context of multiplayer, where I think UK is going to really, really come up as a major player. UK was kind of the middling of the pack, like maybe 5th place, and I think now they're like much higher up in terms of multiplayer, but we're not talking about mainly multiplayer. One downside of the UK is they are getting a lot of their goods from the EIC, and so to the extent you are importing goods, a lot of those industries will suffer. But on the flip side, in terms of the total industries built, remember, construction is overall way higher, and so that means whatever industries you have starting are, relatively speaking, more valuable than 1.4. The UK has the most amount of like industries built at the start of the game, basically. Like, they have the most construction already invested in stuff. They have 25 buildings, a ton of buildings at like level 25 and higher, and like these types of things. And so if you like look at your buildings at game start, you have more buildings at game start than most other countries, and this will really benefit you a lot, I think. And then talking about Mappy, and they just have enormously good Mappy states. So Lancashire, very, very strong. We have coal, iron, lead. We have the bonus for, coal. We are also going to have, in many states, we are going to have these shipyards bonuses, which this throughput is going to be really nice, because I think you just put a level 1 or 2 shipyard in a bunch of places, and then you build the ships as needed for your ports and this type of stuff, and you don't necessarily build really tall in the home counties anymore. But having so many of these places have these modifiers is good. You have a ton of places with coal modifiers. Let's jump in a little bit more. Here we have coal, iron, coal and iron, coal and iron, coal and iron. I think West County, car outside, that's running on some coal. Coal and iron. And so West County doesn't have coal and iron. This one just has coal. This one just has sulfur. I think this doesn't have the whole shebang. No, it has iron and lead. But overall, a very large percentage of your economy is relatively good looking and mappy, so you will be able to build the entire like construction chain of, iron, steel, tools, and this sort of thing. Now, you might want to stack your iron or your steel tall in one place, in which case, but still having iron and coal in the same spot is going to be really good, because your atmospheric engine like feeds in. This requires coal, and then it feeds into coal here, and then you want tools in both, and tools feed into both. So, very, very, very strong in terms of the mappy, in particular, the interests and, the changes to Navy. I think the changes to Navy becoming more important is the most significant thing, but you also do have the insane mappy, relatively good companies, and the insane interest group. You kind of just get pushed in every regard, whereas like something like France is only getting pushed by the absolutely insane interest group. Overall their mappy is not that great. They do have the tech advantage, but it's really just the interest group pulling all the thing, whereas Great Britain is improved, at least it seems, on kind of all fronts. And so we have Great Britain in first place in terms of who the winners are of 1.5 relative to 1.4. Before we do a recap, if you feel that I missed any really important point for any of these 10 countries, feel free to let me know, but we're going to go through it a bit now, just kind of quickly discussing each of these companies in order of which one was improved and which one was detrimented. First place, or the biggest loser we have is the East India Company. You know, they are a country that has an enormous population and enormous growth potential, much like Qing, but they suffer from only having a single state that has coal and iron in it. They do have some interesting things in terms of developing clothing, but overall they also don't have very good companies. They have suffered a lot. In the second place loser, we have the Ottoman Empire. They lost quite a bit. They don't have a single state with coal and iron and wood, but they can integrate Wallachia and Serbia a little bit easier than normal, and they have a few other things kind of going for them, but overall I think they're out of the top 10. I think they're done in the top 10 as a result of also being very backward, starting on traditionalism, which is also a problem with the East India Company, but you can rev immediately and get out from under traditionalism in the EIC, and Mummy will help you, and you do not have that same sort of option as Kebab, but Kebab you do have the exile trick you can do, and so you can kind of rush laissez-faire faster, as we talked about, but overall it's not going to move the needle. Next up, we have Austria, which is just very middling. They have a couple of companies maybe worth using. They have decent states for MAPI, but no outstanding states, and they're a little bit behind in tech, and so overall they suffer. It's important to emphasize that all of these countries are much better relative to all the middling countries and all the bad countries, all these top 10 countries, and so while Austria has improved in a general sense, relative to these other top 10 countries, it is a loser in the third place loser. Next up, we have Qing, which has a lot of interesting things going on. They have a couple of unique interest groups that are worth noting. They have, their unique, the unique devout group, which is going to give decreased radicals from SOL decreases, which is quite a bit interesting one, and they have this armed forces one, which it's still difficult to evaluate how good it is. If they add a ton of mobilization options, this will get really strong, and if they don't, it probably won't be that good overall. They also do have the unique interest group that can go for agrarianism early, and so this is probably what you do with Qing to resolve some of your issues. You have really good MAPI states, but you don't have, as a percentage of all your overall states, the number of really good MAPI states you have is relatively low, and so you'll run out of places to build construction sectors that will be really efficient kind of quickly, so you suffer in that regard, and you suffer from being relatively backward at game start, which is worse in 1.5 than it is in 1.4 even, and so because of this, it's the rank 4 loser. For the top 5th, the rank 5 loser, we have Prussia, which Prussia was difficult because overall, they have probably the best overall MAPI in the game, in terms of percentage of their states and quality of their MAPI, in terms of like local goods. Silesia probably being the second best state in the entire game. And so it's difficult to put here. They also have tier 1 tech, but they don't have any companies to write home about. They have a relatively low population. They will integrate and do the North German Fed thing, and you'll get some even more good MAPI states and this sort of thing. And overall, they're very, very solid, but we're going to have 5 losers and 5 winners, so they are the 5th place loser, almost on the winning side. Next up, we have the 5th place winner, which is the USA, which has the best companies in the game. They had a lot going on for them positively, but a huge nerf to New York. They have decent MAPI in places like Pennsylvania, which can build up quite well, which has both a logging bonus and a coal mines bonus, and builds up really nicely. They also have the advantage of having gold from Mexico, which is, something that's not that disaffected overall by the changes in 1.5, or it's relatively speaking less disaffected. Notably also, we forgot to mention, rice for both Great Qing and EIC is an improvement. It is a bonus, but back to the USA, they have a unique interest group that's maybe good, maybe isn't. I'm not really sure to what extent it is or isn't, and we of course have the loud car outside. But moving on, in 4th place winner, we have Russia, which has some of the best MAPI states in the game. It's not an enormous percentage of their MAPI, but I think they can leverage the wood company better than anyone else, and they can also go laissez-faire really fast. 3 of these, Ottomans, France, and Russia can go laissez-faire faster than most, but you really, they just have the best MAPI here in Russia, because they have places with really high logging, and we have Perm, Ural, the entire portion that's north of Qing all has this, and they don't have a lot of pops necessarily. Transbakial is another really good one. Moscow's good. Also Luhansk is good. They have a bunch of these states that look really good. They have really strong companies on top of that. And their interest groups overall aren't very good, but they also have a ton of pops, which is going to be something that's more crimped with the pop nerf changes overall. And so we have Russia, as the 4th place winner. In the 3rd place winner, we have Spain, which has really strong companies, but their main come up is the fact that Navarra was hugely buffed. I'm pretty sure they used to have a construction malice. I can't remember if it was Aragon and Catalonia that had a construction malice, but they didn't have this 20% iron mines building throughput, and as a proportion of their economy, they can put such a large proportion of their economy under this Navarra 20% bonus, and so on a per construction basis, they are going to be paying a lot less for their construction, or they will be able to build a lot more iron mines to cheapen their construction by building the construction locally and consuming it locally here in Navarra, and so they're a huge winner. They also have, 2 really strong companies that are like going to be worth using, and notably, they have the company, the iron coal steel company, that is the fastest that you can implement and fastest you can put in. So while they are relatively backward, this benefit they have from having their company in the Asturias, the Douro y Campania, which only requires coal mines level 10 or higher, because of this, I had to put them at 3rd place winner. In 2nd place winner, and this could have been argued as first, we have France, and they have okay mappy. They have tier 1 tech. That's not France, that's Sardinia Piedmont. But if we're talking about France, what the thing about France is that's huge is their interest group, their unique interest groups, and notably their petite bourgeoisie is probably better than the regular petite bourgeoisie with the minus state penalties and increased loyalists from standard of living decreases. They won't deficit spend as well with their petite bourgeoisie because it's only 7% instead of 10, but it'll be more consistent. But the thing here is really industrialist state construction efficiency, and if you are playing against the AI, if you're not playing in multiplayer, they're probably 1st place, and also this 25% offense bonus is also going to be pretty nice, especially double to plus 50%. You'll be able to push fast, win wars faster, annex people faster, and so in the context of world conquest, this type of thing, they're definitely 1st. And finally, in 1st place, if you are going to consider multiplayer a little bit more, we have Great Britain, which has a very, very strong, unique people. They basically have everything going for them. They have tier 1 tech. They have really strong mappy states overall, a little bit light on the wood. They have a unique interest group that's very strong, that is getting better loan interest rate and 50% authority. This is very, very, very strong. And then on top of this, they also have really good companies. So they just like win and check boxes in every category. The biggest being, what we haven't mentioned yet, is the introduction of Navy being actually important and diplomatic interest being very, very important. They can declare the most interest at the start of the game, and you will at the very start of the game, you will be taking Great Qing stuff, which you're kind of like railroaded into doing, so depending on how you want to consider that as a positive benefit, but you have the biggest Navy by far, and the Navy being important is a big thing, and Navy also in turns gives these bonuses. You also benefit from the overall construction slowdown, because you start with the most buildings built out of anybody, and so we have Great Qing in not Great Qing, we have the UK in 1st place here, in terms of winners and losers of patch 1.5 as we see it so far in the first update of patch 1.5 open beta, subject to change depending on how things go. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, feel free to give it a like, comment, subscribe, this sort of thing, and other than that, have a good day.